Ready? Yeah. Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to be back with the complete trio. Everyone was busy with speaking engagements and so on. But thank you, all of you that are joining us from not only Eastern, but Central, Mountain, and Pacific time. And we even have fans on the other side of the world. So we're so excited that we're reaching so many people. I am Margarita Estrada, CEO of Voyage Consulting and Business Solutions, and I'm with my colleagues, Darlene Blanco, CEO, and Mario Lewis, CFO. We're so happy to have him back from vacation. He said he had a fabulous time. Remember to grow your business with Voyage, ignite your career with Voyage, and start your voyage today, not later. Start today. For value-added content, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Start Your Voyage, and follow us on LinkedIn. You will see many interesting articles. One we will discuss tonight. So Darlene wrote an article entitled "Empowering Teams for Success." And as you know, Darlene, one of my favorite things is teams, how to build them, how to make them strong, how to make them powerful. So I just love this article because it gives a different twist on leading teams. And it talks about how to be strategic and how to make employees feel safe, but at the same time, take risk. So, as a leader, as a management of a team, how do you give your team some rope while at the same time ensuring that they stay within the parameters that you wanted to stay in? So, expand a little bit on that.
Great. Well, thank you, Margarita. Really great to be back on tonight. I just want to talk about empowering teams for success and recognizing the fact that autonomy over projects is something really important. Folks need to feel like they own the work that they are doing. They should actually own the work that they're doing. They're contributing to it. They're checking up on it. There are lots of follow-ups and probably steps in between. So I feel that if you really want to empower your team members, you need to be able to give them the keys and entrust them. Along with that, though, I really do believe in the mentorship model of the work model. So before relinquishing control, if you will, you might want to maybe have that individual side by side with you, making sure that if they were going to be tasked with making a decision, that you will feel comfortable knowing they will make the right choice. But always knowing that the world is very unpredictable, leaders also need to contingency plan.
It's so true. Go ahead, Mario. Take it from here.
I like the tips what Darlene provided, and the first one really resonated with me. And I've heard the term before, but it's not a term that people use frequently. It was a term of psychological safety. Psychological safety, I think, is a very important tool. And I think if you think about this current time that we're going in, where you see people, they're specific in the government, whose jobs are now at risk, it creates environments where there is maybe limited psychological safety, that I may not be able to say all the things I want as a leader. I may not be able to communicate the way I want. But I think psychological safety is an important tool that effective leaders grant the people who they support, who work for them, so that they can become effective. And I think a lot of what you spoke about, Darlene, really supports creating that culture of psychological safety. So I do want to ask you the question, how important was that concept as you were drafting this article?
Oh, how important was the concept? It was really important because I felt like it was something that's always been really important to me as an individual contributor. And in the roles that I've held, I've always wanted to feel that there was a sense of accomplishment and that the recognition was there. And the recognition didn't necessarily need to always lead to like monetary recognition, but it was more of like a recognition of my work, my value, my ability, and what my capacity is. And it also kind of led itself to different conversations that I could have with my boss and leadership team, of like where, I can be going next. What are the things in my career that I can be working on? What's next on the trajectory for me? It's really hard to identify what your next move is going to be if you don't have some clarity there. So I think that, having autonomy over projects and just recognizing that individuals need a space to grow is an important part of development. It was always something that I was eager to like look for in the roles that I jumped into. Questions would always be, well, where does this go? Like, what happens next? And what is the growth trajectory? Especially when you're, starting in your career and you really want to get an engage and understanding for what you need to be equipping yourself with as well. Like, are there certain things I need to be getting certified in? Are there certain, clubs I need to be, joining, committees I need to, participate in? So a lot of different kind of things come into play when I thought about it, but more importantly, it was all about being authentic and understanding my role as an individual contributor and what that felt like on that end. And, just making sure that people that report to me and that work under my, team and leadership are knowing that they're always going to be recognized. Every project that was out there, my team members get shout outs for.
Nice.
Awesome. So I have actually, I want to touch on the next point about promoting healthy debate with both of you, right? Because, yeah, we're both here, because I find it very, very interesting. So there's a difference between trying to persuade your team to your opinion and reaching a consensus. So as you're beginning a project, you have an idea of where you want it to go. But yet other people in your team have a different opinion or a different way that they feel they should go. So how, as a leader, can you stop yourself from being tempted to say, well, this is how I want, right? This is what I want, and this is how it's gonna go. Right? So how do you stop yourself from just jumping in, and instead, how do you make the team come to a consensus, or do you just say this is where I want it to go? How would you two handle that?
I'll take a stab at that, and I find this to be one of the more challenging things in my leadership capacities, because one, you want to create the environment, and that goes back to psychological safety, is where people feel that they can contribute in an unfettered way, that you're not going to limit their ability to contribute. But you should also create an environment where you're saying that the best idea will win. And if not the best, sometimes the best idea won't win based on factors that are outside of that leader's control. But being transparent in those times, that when we come with a decision, I just need to know we are all committed, and I'll share with you how we come to that decision. But sometimes I have to make the call as the team leader, because I'm accountable for delivering on it. And just being truly transparent and on all of the levers that need to be pulled, but then still at that point stepping back and then say, let's find out as a group what is the best idea, and making sure that the vocal people in the group communicate, and then you take a moment to ask the quiet people in the group to voice their concerns. Because then if you demonstrate that you're listening to each and every person, hopefully you're creating that safe environment where people feel that their contribution is heard, then acknowledged, and then evaluated, and hopefully they are all part of that final decision that gets made. And then they can feel that, because the last part is you want them to feel bought in once that decision is made. And then if their decision doesn't get selected, you kind of say, you may pull them and say, here's some of the other factors that you may not realize, but this went into the decision-making process. And I think if you're able to do that, it may not happen the first few times, but if you do it repeatedly, you then can get to the outcome where people understand that they can contribute, and should feel empowered to do it, but then they're a part of the solution. So that's the way I think about it, Margarita. It's not perfect. It's hard to implement, and I've failed at it so many times. But by practicing, I think I've gotten a little bit better at it.
Darlene, take a stab at that one.
Yeah, as I'm listening to Mario speak, I think about just how challenging it really can be because the whole dynamic of this is that you have to recognize that these are people, right? This is not like, very like unpredictable. And, one of the things that I really started to focus on was, the emotional like sort of touch points and recognizing how people are showing up, and I started to do a little bit of work and took some courses online that really just helped me be a little bit more of an observer and just study people and their behavior patterns and recognize if someone's feeling unsettled or upset. Because Mario, you mentioned how you would take a moment to really ask those that are a little bit more quieter to speak up and ask to share their opinion. But what I recognize in a lot of situations is there's a lot of silos and groups that form, and there are a lot of people that maybe are really scared to even just jump in and be a part of it, and they really have great ideas and they oftentimes get unheard, and you're trying to kind of get everybody to come to the table with what their real opinion is, but they know that if they express themselves, then they're going to get some flack from members of their team that maybe is not agreeing with that, and they want to have everybody coming into the boss's office with like everybody thumbs up here. No one, no, 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 don't you dare, like, and it's just like, what if you're not on board, and you want to really, so it really is a challenge. You're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with people, and you're also recognizing that uncertainty and situations are happening all around us. And each person is affected by their own situation, things that are happening that we have no idea, and every time I see an employee get a phone call or like, I just like, and I ask no questions. I'm like, take care of your family, take care, do what you got to do. It's just like you just never know what's happening. But getting back to like what happens when you're at the meeting table and you're trying to kind of decide, working at a nonprofit, and having very little access to funding, knowing that you can only choose, a couple of initiatives a year, it's really tough for passionate people. I mean, these folks in the nonprofit world, they really love what they're doing. And, if they feel really strongly about a particular initiative, it's really hard to then, say, hey, we're going to shelf that. Um, but it's part of being a leader and getting everybody, I think, to, agree at some point and looking at all the different factors that are involved and why that decision is leaning that way. I think people are mature enough to recognize that, and I think that's really what I've recognized is, hey, we want to do it all that we can. And, we have to choose one. And it's just like when you're going to the store and you're trying to choose, you can't have it all. So it is
And
what it is.
yes, and so how do you, as a leader, try to keep yourself out of the way, like keep that ego out of the way, right? When you want to
Oh,
jump
like
in
jump in and like, oh,
and you
you
want
mean
to say
what?
no, how do you bring yourself say no and just kind of like steer the ship, so to speak?
Margarita, I'm guilty because kind of like as a leader, I kind of know and I have a pulse for kind of what's going to work. So I definitely am guilty of getting in there and, like, listen, it's my job to protect the team. I want to give everybody autonomy and I let them do what they need to do. But if I know they're going to go into a brick wall, I'm not going to let that happen. So their feelings are going to be hurt. It's too bad. I'm like, listen, I'm stepping in here. Sorry. I'm sorry if your feelings are going to be hurt, but we can't do this A, B, and C. But respectfully, what I realize, Margarita, is a lot of times employees and staff really don't have all of the knowledge circle, right? Because they're not
Mhm.
privy to certain access levels of information. So they maybe not understand why a particular decision is being made because it's way above their head and these decisions are happening at higher levels of the organization, so they don't have
Mhm.
access to what stories are, I call them. I'm like, what are the backstories, like what is the and because of that they're kind of a little misinformed when they're coming in to make some of these decisions. So I found a lot of that as well, and that's why it's really important to keep information shared as much as possible so that when you do have folks coming in to make a decision on something, at least they're better, like better equipped in a sense to make the right choice.
Good point. Oh
I
my,
think
that last point was like on the money. Loved it. Which leads us to lead by example. Okay. So I've been reading this book. It's called Mining Group Gold. I don't know if you can see it.
Mhm.
Mining Group
Yeah,
Gold. And in this book, it says that one of the ways in which a leader can demonstrate not only proper leadership, but to lead the direction of a meeting is to from the very beginning to state the purpose and the outcome that is expected. So in other words, this way it is clear from the very beginning, and by the end of the meeting there has to be an outcome for so that there's no waste in the getting together, because they talk about how much money is spent on meetings that have no purpose, right? And
oh
they
my
just
God,
keep on going on, and there's no purpose to the meeting. So if you state the purpose and you state the outcome, then right away people know what they need to do. Have either one of you ever used that method?
absolutely. It's because I engage in so many meetings a day. I manage expectations going into a meeting. If I see a meeting that I don't understand what the purpose is, I will refuse to go, or I will email the person and say, can you provide something so that everybody knows? And when I start meetings, we are dearly beloved, we are gathered here for this. Because and I think the term I like to use, I like to set up the guardrails. And guardrails for things that will come into that meeting. So we're creating a space where we're here for a purpose, but there's nothing else that's beyond those guardrails. And then and here's what we need to accomplish in this amount of time. And I set meeting times very strategically. Uh, I know people like to, it's going to be a half an hour, or it's going to be, sometimes I'll set 45-minute, 40 minutes, 15-minute, 10-minute meetings. It's just to manage expectations on how much time we need or given, or that I personally think should be allotted to this conversation. So, and I think all of those things then manage expectations. And the way I do that is because I want to be led by example. So I set that example, and my team is expected to do the same, because they're managing not just their time, but also my time, and they're managing the outcomes for the team. So by doing that, it also creates room where there's going to be, I also want room for feedback on it. So when after meetings, we do set up time. Hey, how did that go? How did that go? Did that meet the measure? Did that align with these values that we're communicating? So, and that's part of the judgment, because we do have so many meetings. So yeah, by setting up guardrails and expectations, I think it leads to better outcomes, especially when you have so many meetings and competing priorities.
Really cool. Okay, let's due to time constraints. Let's go to the next point right away. And I love this. Recognize and reward constructive dissent. This really blew my mind, to acknowledge employees who challenge the norms, because that's something that we normally do not see. And Darlene, when I saw this, I was blown away. So, how do you do that?
I'm listening because I want to hear.
Yeah, how do you
Uh,
do that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, again, what I've realized is people are so intelligent and they're gifted and talented, and they're on your teams and they're empowered and they're doing such great work. You really need to really recognize what they're bringing to the table, but also to remind them, especially if you know that they're really talented. Everybody has the superstars on their team. If you have those superstars, you want to really say to them, hey, listen, I'm counting on you. I'm counting on you to make sure you have my back, right? That's what it's really all about. Because at
Mhm.
the end of the day, we are a team. We are being acknowledged as a team. And when we show up in the broader business plan, what our team contributes is a holistic piece of that pie. So when I'm thinking about that slice that we're putting in, and I'm thinking about all the different duties as a leader that you're tasked with, you're really watching everything, and hey, anything can fall through the cracks. And so I say to my superstars, especially my superstars that I know are really at the scene and center to all the privy to all those materials that are going out and documents and emails, seems off to you, don't think just because you see that there's a title associated with the individual who's sending it, or they have a particular role in the organization, or that they can't make a mistake on you, not to just take everybody's word for it, but to actually take a moment to be like, let me read through this real quick. Don't just sign it and send it on just because it came from such and such. And that's something that I learned that was really valuable. It actually helped me get elevated quickly in my role because executive leaders said, wow, she's actually reading this stuff. Because I'm calling attention to things, and it started something as, just so I'm really good at like catching all the typos. So it started as silly as like, so should we send this? And I'm like, gosh, if I send this looks really bad for the organization. And it was something as silly as like, say, a letter. And I paused to say, no, I have to make sure I check on this, because just because it got, I received it from such and such doesn't mean it's just good to go. And hey, like, oh, thank you for catching that. This is important. You need to be able to have your team feel comfortable enough to catch the errors, to vocalize them, or to even question things that they might see and say, hey, should we be operating this way? I'm curious. Because I saw A, B, and C, because there's a lot that falls through the cracks, and leaders are tasked with so much. So we really need to make sure that it goes back to having teams and people feeling that level of comfort Mario talked about, where we want people to just feel like they can share everything, they can make a mistake, they can they can learn from their mistake, but they can also feel like they can challenge their superior and say, hey, I found something here, this doesn't match. Did you really look at this? Have you taken and for that, it's valuable. I've saved so many things over my career. My in highlights, when I worked as like an executive assistant to a chief CEO, president of an organization, there was so much traction going through and stacks of paper. And my primary duty was organizing things and getting signature documents ready and prepared for the boss. Now I have literally no idea what these things, but every time I would come through, I'd be like, hey, seems a little off, after some time, and you just become such a valuable asset. You call things out, you see it, they're like, oh, let Darlene see, you become the proofreader. It really does work, but the only thing I say is a little guidance on emotional intelligence, being respectful, and knowing how to challenge authority in the right way. Being curious and being respectful will take your career to all sorts of heights. Now, if you're going to be like Mrs. or Mr. Smarty Pants and think that you're going to go outsmart people, and then you're going about things wrong. That's not cool.
That's beautiful, Darlene. And I think this would be a great time for me to share with you that if you are enjoying this content, if you're enjoying the advice that Darlene just provided, I want to remind you to grow your business with Voyage, ignite your career with Voyage. I believe it is important that you start your voyage today. And I want to also remind you that if you are looking for value-added content, please follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Start Your Voyage. And it is important that you also follow us on LinkedIn to get business and strategy focused content. I think the next topic we talk about is, I also want to maybe Margarita point the point around establishing dedicated feedback channels. You are definitely the queen of the 360-degree model, and that informs us on how we should think about establishing feedback as a strategic tool in order to create greater opportunities. So I want you to, I liked the content that was provided in that fifth example. Can you delve deeper on how do we establish dedicated feedback channels?
Well, I think the key is to listen, right? This is why we got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? To keep your mouth shut. Listen to what your team is talking about. Make sure that those ideas that they have are acknowledged and considered. Because there are times I've been to meetings where team members express themselves and they're automatically shut down. And what happens? They isolate, and sometimes they don't even participate. They figure, what's the use of me being here? I'm going to be shut down anyway, right? So as a team leader, it's important to listen to everyone. And like Darlene said before, or no, it was you that said, to those that are quiet, to make sure that they speak up, because we have to remember that the teams have diverse backgrounds and offer information that may not be readily available at the moment, right? So we have to ensure that everyone has a voice, that there is a safe environment. If discussions need to be had with certain people on the side, you have them on the side and not embarrass them in front of the team, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen that too, where team leads, they'll just tell that person off right then and there. And what happens to the rest of the team?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Either one, their respect for the leader stops, or two, they'll say, hey, if that person was shut down, well, I'm going to shut down too.
Yeah.
And they say, and they do, like you said, Mario, in a couple of weeks ago, the quiet quit. Right? The quiet quit, where they say, well, mentally, they're just not there. So that's my take on that.
But I think, and that aligns to the point that teams perform better when people feel empowered to speak up and
Mhm.
the opportunity to share their thoughts. And I think in leadership, it's challenging because often, like I think Darlene, you pointed earlier, as the leader, you have more information, you have a way that you know works, and therefore it is hard to kind of step back and say, how do I let their ideas come up to the surface, and then I can integrate some of my ideas rather than let my ideas take over. So I wanted you to kind of, Darlene, just kind of, how were you able to do that in the environments the leadership environments that you've created? Because it is tempting to just to kind of launch out there and provide the solution, but allowing them to help come up with a solution is a deeper challenge.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I think that one of the strategies that works for me, I tend to lean on it often, and I haven't really had any kind of failures. So it's been really great with this particular tool that I use, which is just kind of like, let's learn together. People love that. People love that. But I will say, warning for the leader, it does get exhausting because you have multiple people on your teams. And, if you have larger teams that disseminate down into bigger, just kind of grows, then you have to be selective. Oh my goodness, who do I mentor? And, you don't want to disrupt. So that part of it can be a little bit of a challenge. But I think if you provide that, like, let's learn this together and let's build this together. If it's a smaller team, it really is a sweet spot because you get everybody on the train, you build something together. No one's going to really, be against it because they're a part of, compiling it. And, if you're taking their thoughts into consideration right at that moment where it's, all happening live, it's a beautiful thing. And no one's really going to contradict it because they're all a part of, building it out. And when I say they're all part of building it out, I recognize that I'm also seated at that table, guiding that discussion.
You're at the table too. That's awesome.
Guiding that discussion. So if the team might be leaning or going in kind of, out of the guardrails, I kind of like, but I still like alert them, like I alert them and, indicate that we need to keep it here because, things get, but I bring them back in. But again, you're not always going to be able to do this every time, but I really think it's a real win because it really teaches people how they need to be interacting and thinking about things. And then you can really develop like a system that works even when you're not around because leaders are often tasked with being away and having to go to conferences. And what happens when you're away and everyone's scrambling because they can't come to a decision? If you've taught them how to come together, work as a team, collaborative effort here, build out the SWOT analysis, or like if you've taught them to do this and you've sat with them to do this and you've taken that time with them, then you can be away and do what you need to do and come back and know that they will share with you, hey, this came up while you were gone. Here's how we came to a resolution. Rather than you come back and you have a whole laundry list of problems, you have to help people like these people and they can solve the problems.
Awesome. I think this is a good time to transition to the part where we talked about the 5 tips for creating an empowering culture. And I almost want to say it'd be nice if if you can pick the one that resonates most with you and explain why. Uh, I know this it's an odd question. I was going to give Margarita or Darlene the opportunity to jump in first on which one of those tips for creating an empowering culture resonates most with you.
I would say for me, number 4, promote open and transparent communication.
And why?
I think that because sometimes I've seen leaders that they say they want transparent communication, but then act differently when you confront them, right? So it's I think that I've had bosses that way, and how can you talk to someone who only sees their point of view or that they are correct? So that one really resonates with me. I think it's important to have, if you are truly open and transparent, then you have to be truly open and transparent. That you have to lead by that example, and you have to say, if you're wrong, you say, look, I apologize for this. Let's move forward and and of course, don't apologize too much over and over again. But the whole point is that there's nothing wrong with an apology. Right? There's nothing wrong with saying, look, I was wrong. Let's see how we could work together to correct it.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the whole key. That was wrong. But let's work together. Let's see how we could come up with a different decision that can work all around. That's 180, 180, 360. That's how it works. So that's the one that resonates with me. And also lead with empathy and support, which I think those two are both together. They're both linked.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Darlene?
Yeah, I think for me, you all know I'm like the never ending. I never stop going to school. Like encourage continuous learning. That's me all day long. Encourage continuous learning. I really believe your teams and folks around you can grow if they continue to just be involved in learning. And learning can look like whole different kinds of ways. It doesn't necessarily always need to be like educational field related and certificate related. Encourage continuous learning could also be being a part of mentorship programs and taking part of other parts of those training sessions within organizations where they'll say, hey, if you want to learn more about this, always being like resourceful of what's an opportunity for me to learn more about how I can do more, get engaged. I think encouraging continuous learning is where it's at. I know for me, I really double down on that. I'm always looking to figure out, as an expert, I always want to figure out, what's up and coming, what are some of the new trends I need to be on the lookout for, so that's always a cycle. And I encourage my team members, even at their expert level, to continue to dig into research and to allocate time for that. I actually encourage them to allocate time for that, which you'd be surprised because, most people are surprised when I say to them, hey, I'm really okay if you need to take a few hours, throughout the day here or there, block your calendar, just go do some research because that research is essential to us. So, I'm thinking continuous learning all the time.
Wow, you explained that so well. It's interesting because that was the one that I was looking at because I'm a big fan of whether it be school or encouraging my team to read a lot of articles about the industry in which we are, like about what's going on with regulation. I think that's critical. But since you did so eloquent of a job describing that one, I'm going to pick the next one that I was really passionate about, which was being able to celebrate and recognize your team members. I think that is something that is somewhat understated especially in the corporate environment. And I think that it's almost sometimes a little cultural. I think that at an early age, when people are competitive, they don't take the time to celebrate others' achievements. Uh, just good sportsmanship, just applauding the person who comes up with a great idea or does something that's valuable, whether the person's on your team or not. So I think being able to create a culture where you actively, visibly celebrate others creates an environment where that's extra special that allows people to go above and beyond. Because I think it's just important that you demonstrate celebration for behaviors that you want people to amplify. So I think more of that type of celebration, especially in like in a corporate and even nonprofit environments, is critical to creating the cultures that we're looking to build. So just being able to just celebrate other people. And it's funny because I think the way we interact with each other, we all have our the focuses of growing ourselves. But I think we spent time when we get together on this call before. What's the latest things that you've been up to? And we celebrate each other. And I think that's why we've created a culture within in our circle that is pretty powerful. So I thank you guys for celebrating me, and we will continue to celebrate each other.
I think the important thing also is to is to provide your team with the tools that they need to succeed.
Yeah.
Many times I've been in teams where I've just been told, okay, do this, but I haven't been provided with the tools, right? So I end up researching here, researching there. If I would have had the tools from the very beginning, well, maybe the project would have been done a lot faster, right? I'm not saying to give me everything, but give me the tools that I need to succeed. But eventually I got through those projects and I was successful, but it helps if your leader says, okay, these are the tools, run with it and do what you need to do.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing. You need to give the tools across the team. So it's not just one or two have it, but it's like what will happen is that based on the different levels of expertise, you can then create mentorship or support across your team to allow everybody to come up to the same level.
Exactly.
I think this is a good time to kind of wrap it up. We in this, I think we had a pretty powerful conversation talking about creating cultures, empowering cultures, and I think the tips that you provided, Darlene, really cascaded from one part of the conversation to the next. And I think the way the conclusion ends is that it's not just about leadership cannot be delegated or abdicated. It has to be delivered. And it's creating that type of culture of trust that is critical to creating those psychological safety environments where people can be successful. So I welcome you guys to go provide parting thoughts on how our audience should move forward.
I'll go first, and then Darlene can close up. So I was watching an interview today with Felicia Rashad, of course, and Charlamagne the God, and she said in the interview, she said, carry light, share light. Light is not heavy. Make yourself great by making others greater. And I would say that sums up exactly what Darlene is talking about in this article.
I love it. Oh, wow. It has been amazing to come together tonight and talk about empowering leadership and empowering teams for success. I love the work that we do here at Voyage. Grow your business with Voyage, ignite your career with Voyage, start your voyage today. For value-added content, follow us on Facebook, like, share, let new followers in, let them be a part of this as well. We're sharing some really valuable tips, tools. Visit our LinkedIn page. All of our articles live there. Come on to our website. Submit an intake survey if you would like some, coaching or mentorship with us and some personal one-on-one time with some of the members of our team. We're doing great work. We're here to support you. It is my pleasure to close us out tonight and also to say, keep doing great work. Every time you're making a decision, always think to yourself, am I doing something for me? Am I doing something for them? Am I doing something that makes sense? I always think twice before I move something forward. Empowering teams, leading people, always think positive and always think about the decisions that you're making, how they're influencing those around you. It's powerful. Leadership is powerful, and you really want to always be bringing the best out in everyone. Have a good night, everyone, and thank you for being with us tonight.